Hey everyone, I am here with Marc Marling. He is the founder of corporatethought.com, so you can go there and check him out. And I love his take on his new take on connecting people in the business world and how they execute that. He's also a super foodie, much like I am. And we had a great couple conversations on the podcast, so I'm super excited to have him stick around to do this little conversation here as well. Marc, what's up, man?
Hey, doing all right. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Just full disclosure, I want to tell the audience this is a little bit different. Typically, what we do is right after we record the podcast, we hop on and do this little conversation. So it's like a recap. You and I, because we talk so much and we love to have conversations, we turned a 20-minute recording into a 1-hour conversation the last time. So now we had to hop back on at a different time. And we're actually going to record your podcast right after this, which I'm super excited for. But it's a little bit of a different energy and vibe, and I kind of like testing things like this. So thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is fun to use social media to some extent, or these different ways of doing things as ways of seeing what works. It's amazing. Technology has allowed us to come to a point where you can be sitting in Pittsburgh and I can be sitting in Virginia. We can be looking at each other. We can have this conversation. Um, Imagine what the cost to put this on 20 years ago would have been, and it's essentially like nothing. Uh, you know,
Aside from that, let me give you one better. I remember when I first started podcasting back in 2011, and I was looking at my friend and I were sitting down and we're like, well, how do we do an interview show? And we were looking at, like, this was before Zoom and before all of these other tools. And we had like all these different wires and all these different things and connections and mixing boards. And I was just the point where I was like, it's too much, too many moving parts. It was ridiculously complicated. Now, fast forward to where we are today and look at what we can do just with a click of a button.
it's incredible, and technology is there. Cost. I talk to solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and folks all the time about how easy it is to get into business now. For all of the complaints about that all the good stuff has already been invented or something else. First of all, none of that's true. And secondly, you can have $100 in your pocket and basically start a company. And it doesn't cost very much. It doesn't cost very much to get your word out there. It requires effort. It requires some sweat, but it doesn't require lots of money. Someone recently told me they wanted to form a C corp. They were going to start their company and they wanted to form a C corp. And I said, well, why are you forming a C corp on day one? I said, that's just, a lot of tax obligations and other expenses. And I said, oh, well, private equity is going to want to get in and and I'm like, okay, let's slow down. Let's start with where we should start with. Let's start with the fact that no one even knows who you are or what you're selling. So why don't you just form a nice little LLC and talk to them about insulating and keeping the entity protected by not commingling funds and things of that nature. You can tell I used to be a lawyer. But ultimately, let's start off at a reasonable place. Let's not jump to the, private equity is going to buy me argument on day one. How about that?
Once a lawyer, always a lawyer, though, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things, we can't help it. I am not a practicing attorney. I always make that very clear so no one thinks they should follow my legal advice. I am retired from the practice of law. In fact, I call myself a recovering attorney. Um, but yeah, once a lawyer, always a lawyer. There's a certain amount of things you just remember to do right.
That thought process never leaves, right?
No, I paid for all that damn education. I might as well use it for something.
When you said damn education, I thought you said brain damage at first, and I'm like,
Well,
what?
yeah, it could be that too.
I was like, anyway, yeah. So I think that business, I think the real cost of entry for business today, anyway, from my perspective, as you said, it doesn't cost a lot of money. Pretty much anyone can start it, but I think the real cost is innovation. And I think that's where it becomes a little more difficult because, as you said, not everything has been invented yet. There's still tons of opportunity and creativity, but you have to be a little more creative in today's world with so many different things out there in order to stand out. I mean, you may create something that's really cool, but if you don't get it out there and it doesn't stand out in the marketplace, it's going to get lost. So innovation is huge, I think.
But that's why, to go back to where we started this conversation, that is exactly why trying things out. How about, mixing and matching, how you're recording your things, what you're gonna talk about, styles of even I know you have a multi, your show's on 6 days a week. You are constantly putting content out there, but I think, being innovative, trying new things, seeing how your audience responds. Does this make more sense? Or, I think it's interesting. Sam Harris, I think, charges for his podcast. He does a shortened version for free, but he charges. But if you can't afford it, he's more than happy to give you full access for free. Just tell him you can't afford it, because he doesn't want to take advertising dollars. And everyone's different. Everyone's shows are different, but I think it's a new universe, and I think, and also because we're doing this one with YouTube, is the surface has barely been scratched, right?
Hmm. Oh, I
Uh,
agree.
yeah, it's gonna go. I have to wonder, after this whole COVID thing, and I think that commercial real estate's probably on the way out. I wouldn't want to be in that. I wouldn't want to be in movie theater business. But you know what? I'm not sure I want to be in network television, and I'm not sure I've wanted to be in network television for some time.
Yeah.
Because Mario, you could just be a television star tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe. I've done a lot of TV in the past. And one of the things that attracted me to podcasting is, when it comes to the entrepreneurial landscape, it gives you executionally, it's very similar to broadcasting. I mean, you talk to a microphone and people consume it through listening, which is a very intimate exchange. However, it's very different from positioning perspectives, especially so as an entrepreneur. Podcasting is much more valuable because you don't have to appease the board. You don't have to appease advertisers if you don't want to. You're not stuck to a location. The way broadcasting typically works is their signal reaches a certain location, and the whole goal is to get as many people as possible within that location where their signal goes to listen, where the radio signal goes to listen at a certain time so that their ratings go up, and then they can leverage those ratings to raise their advertising dollars. That's the typical business model. However, with podcasting, anyone with a smartphone or a computer has access to your show. So unless you make the content about location, it doesn't have to be location dependent. It's about the niche. It's about the topic. It's about the conversation. And as an entrepreneur, that is super valuable because not only can you build authority and create relationships, but you build it around a core interest. And now that in and of itself to me is like gold.
I think you're right, and I think so. I model my show, the Corporate Thought Show, a little bit around uh, what it is like when I counsel um, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and I try to bring on guests who will talk about their experiences in building something, including all of the um, I don't necessarily call them failures. They could be failures or it could just be obstacles, because I think too often there's a lot of shows out there where people are promoting what they're doing, which I get. I have no problem with that. But I think that the context is, it's so much more interesting if you understand that someone who you might look up to and you say, wow, they're uber successful now. Well, they weren't always, right? And then when I do counsel some people who give up so fast, the first sign of struggle, the first obstacle, like, oh, I can't do it, I'm never going to get over this, or I don't have the time, or they'll throw 101 excuses out there. And so I always feel like if they could hear the stories of the people who they see have made it, but not make it seem so easy, like they didn't just make it instantaneously, but they had their struggles, that I think is what makes for a better show and a more compelling story. And I'm a little bit less interested in the nitty gritty of people's businesses. I'm more interested in who they are as people. So, we try to unpack on my show a little bit about your origin story. How did you get to where you are now? Go all the way back. Like what were those things? What was, hell, if there was a teacher in high school that started you on this path, I want to know about that. And I want to know what you heard from that teacher that started you on that path, or that book you read, or that thing whatever it was that got you going, because I think you can learn so much. I'm a person who looks forward, but I think that we shouldn't forget our history either. How about that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Mark, thank you so much. I love having these conversations with you. I can't wait for people to hear. If they haven't heard the podcast yet, if they're watching this video on social media because it drops first there, I can't wait for them to hear the podcast episodes we did. If they've already heard those, they know what I'm talking about. It's such a pleasure to speak with you and remind people they can find more about you at corporatethought.com. And I can't wait to have another conversation with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mario.